A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support. Confession: I gave head to a freaking banana. Yes, you read that right, and before you jump to conclusions about my sanity, let me explain. I'm just an average 20-something living in a small town, working at a local grocery store, and spiraling into a mild existential crisis as I try to figure out life and relationships. I've always had a quirky sense of humor, but my friends would often joke that my romantic life was just as ripe for comedy as it was for disaster. My last relationship had ended in a particularly awkward way. He had decided he needed space, only to backtrack and unceremoniously announce he was now dating someone who he claimed was better suited for him. I didn't have the heart to tell him that meant the end of my nights spent watching terrible reality TV and my weekends filled with the silence of loneliness. So, in my state of mild despair, I decided to throw a little party for myself. I bought a few bottles of wine, some snacks, and yes, a bunch of bananas. I sat on the couch, watching my favorite movies while indulging in a few glasses. As the evening wore on, the combination of a couple of glasses of wine and my ever-present bad sense of humor led to an unusual thought. Wouldn't it be funny to recreate a famous scene from a movie using just a banana? There I was, giggling to myself, holding the banana in one hand, and promptly made a comment about giving head to the banana, laughing hysterically at my own lack of dignity. My mind was buzzing with the absurdity of it all, but as I leaned in to take a ridiculously dramatic bite, inspiration struck. What if I turned it into a performance? It felt ridiculous but sort of liberating. Why not poke fun at my love life and the angst that seemed to follow me like a bad smell? I set my phone on a nearby shelf, hit record, and proceeded to give the banana a show. I don't know what possessed me, perhaps it was the wine or the need to embrace the absurdity of life, but I made a point to give that banana a moment to shine. I twirled and laughed, exaggerating every move until I lost myself in the charade, winking at the camera and pretending the banana was the sweetest lover I'd ever had. So there I was, full of self-derision and ridiculousness, recording myself in what I now refer to as the banana incident. A few friends got a hold of the video, and to my astonishment, it turned into a mini-viral sensation among a tight-knit group of social media friends. What had started as a moment of deep sadness turned into something quite remarkable. It pulled me back from the brink of feeling sorry for myself and showed me that laughter, even at my own expense, was a gift I'd forgotten I possessed. Weeks went by, and I began to embrace my sense of humor in ways I never thought possible, sharing my journey through life and heartbreak in an unapologetic light. I connected with new people online, all drawn to my newfound candor and kooky content. Perhaps life didn't need to be so serious. Just when I thought I was done with the banana saga, I got an unexpected message. It was from an old college friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His messages were lighthearted and full of laughter, recalling the outrageous things we did back in our carefree days. It led to a few exchanges back and forth, and the connection felt different, deeper somehow. We agreed to meet up, and to my surprise, I found myself excited, because he had seen the infamous banana video and thought it was the most hilarious thing he'd ever witnessed. When we met, it was awkward but charming in a way that felt warm. We talked, we laughed, and as the evening wore on, I realized that this was the first time I truly felt connected to someone since that terrible breakup. So, you see, giving head to a banana wasn't just a ridiculous act of drunken escapism, it was a turning point that led me to rediscover laughter, rekindle friendships, and embrace the beauty of the absurd in life. Sometimes, you have to let go of everything, even your dignity, to find joy and connection. In retrospect, my confession isn't about the banana, it's about how taking a moment to explore the ridiculousness we often shy away from can lead us down enchanting, unexpected paths. Update: a month later, that college friend and I decided to take things to the next level. We're officially dating. And yes, we've shared a few more crazy moments that involve fruits and laughter, which have solidified our bond even more. Life can be so wonderfully absurd, and honestly, I can't wait to see where this new adventure takes us, knowing that sometimes the most ridiculous confessions can lead to the greatest joys. As I sit down to reflect on the whirlwind of my life since that fateful day, a gentle smile creeps across my face, and I can't help but laugh at how surreal it all feels. The very idea that I, a fairly normal 20-something struggling to find myself in the vibrant chaos of college campus life, could end up dating one of the most adventurous spirits I know is, frankly, absurd. My experiences had primed me for a strict adherence to what was sensible, but somehow, when laughter collided with randomness, it unlocked parts of me I hadn't even realized were closed off. Let's not forget the banana, though. In mere moments of silliness, it became an emblem of spontaneity and fun, something to be looked back on fondly rather than with embarrassment. Our mutual unorthodoxy sparked an unspoken camaraderie between us, something blossoming into laughter-filled nights where we'd recount our craziest experiences over shared ice cream sundaes, rich chocolate drizzling down the sides, rivaled only by the heaps of fruity toppings we continually consumed in jest of that first encounter. Conversations flowed easily, we shared secrets intertwined with memories, and each time he'd wink at me over the table, I felt a warmth I'd once thought reserved for fairy tales. It was during one of those late-night talks, surrounded by cushions and lingering energy from a vibrant party we'd just left, that I discovered we were both fascinated by the absurd elements of life, the little quirks we found that reminded us not to take things too seriously. He confessed that day how he recently wrestled with the idea of joining a juggling club, not because he particularly wanted to juggle, but rather because it seemed hilariously awkward and a little outlandish. We burrowed deeper into our joyfully whimsical thoughts, and who knew a casual conversation could emit so much warmth and connection. As the month neatly slipped away into a golden series of dates, I found myself growing more and more attached, not just to him but to the laughter and adventure we created together, filling up my once monotonous life with dazzling episodes of spontaneity. One particular afternoon, in an impulsive fit of creativity, I suggested we should enter a local fruit sculpture competition that promoted sustainability and art. The idea met with guffaws, and he played along. We both knew it would involve making something wild and bizarre, definitely fruit-inspired. Days later, we stood in my tiny kitchen, hands sticky with juice and laughter erupting between all the gut-busting negotiations of who would carve the watermelon into a shark and who would get the pineapple crown. We envisioned an outrageous creation that would not only make the judges scratch their heads in disbelief but also bring smiles to the faces of anyone observing our ridiculous efforts. As we cut, sculpted, and assembled our fruity tribute, I realized we weren't just creating a quirky piece, we were crafting our own little sanctuary, one laugh and mishap at a time, stamped with the ridiculousness of our adventures. The day of the competition arrived in a flurry of excitement, where we displayed our overly ambitious pineapple shark hybrid that looked more like a creature out of a cartoon than anything serious. We embraced the absurdity wholeheartedly, encouraging the giggles and whispers from passers-by instead of sympathizing with our failed artistic endeavor. The joy we felt, sharing inside jokes about our outlandish expectations, made the whole experience so rich it didn't matter that we didn't win. The connection we forged amidst the chaos and creativity became its own victory lap, one I relished deeply. Looking back on this past month, I realize what really matters isn't the moments that conform to a certain ideal but rather those that push boundaries, bend the rules, and open up new ways to see our lives unfold. Whether it's giving a silly oral salute to a banana or creating the world's most ludicrous fruit sculpture, these occurrences remind us that joy blooms in the strangest of places. This relationship, which started with a whimsical confession, has encouraged me to fully embrace the absurdities and find companionship in shared laughter, transforming my once rigid view of life into a more colorful canvas ripe with joy and adventure. And as I embarked on this journey, I realized my heart isn't just bound to the fun we've shared but also to the genuine connection forming seamlessly as we continue to explore the ridiculousness that life hands us. With each step, I can't wait to discover what new crazy moment awaits us next and how these unplanned adventures will author the next chapters of our delightfully absurd story. As the weeks rolled into a month of uncharted romance, the absurdities we chased together began to shape my world in ways I had never anticipated. Our lives became a confusing yet wonderfully vibrant tapestry woven with silly moments and heartfelt confessions. We set a peculiar rhythm to our relationship, one that was fueled by spontaneity and an appreciation for the ridiculous. Our first official date was at a quaint little fruit market that sprawled just outside the city, a hidden gem we stumbled upon while searching for fresh ingredients for an impromptu picnic. As we ambled through aisles brimming with colorful produce, I found solace in our shared jokes and the way we could burst into laughter over the oddly shaped vegetables that protruded from their boxes like playful imposters. I watched her pick up a rogue-looking radish and, with a mischievous grin, announce that it resembled a mythical creature, its earthy tones giving way to vivid storytelling. It felt surreal to be with someone who embraced these fleeting absurdities as if they were sacred, as if the bizarre moments held secrets that could weave our hearts closer together. One sunny afternoon, as we tucked ourselves into a grassy nook beneath sprawling cherry blossoms, we decided to bring our own twist to the typical picnic fare. Inspired by the playful essence of our relationship, we rummaged through our gathering of fruits, bananas, kiwi, and stubbornly ripe peaches, and came up with a silly competition. Each of us would create the most absurd fruit art we could imagine, an homage to our own quirks. I crafted a banana in the shape of a guitar, complete with toothpick strings, while she managed to create a hastily constructed fruit face that made us both chuckle uncontrollably. These moments became not just laughter shared but also silent acknowledgments of the warmth blossoming between us. While we savored the summer sun, I felt my heart flutter as we gazed at one another, the playful energy uniting us in a way that felt pure and right. But life, in its beautifully chaotic nature, also had its shadows. With the excitement, I wrestled with a gnawing fear. Was this delightful absurdity merely a phase? I had seen relationships begin with laughter only to sour when mundane realities encroached. To confront these insecurities, one night I invited her over for a cozy movie marathon. As we nestled beneath blankets, our favorite snacks laid out before us, I decided to confess that I felt a flicker of worry, that our spontaneous moments could lose their charm. Instead of recoiling from my honesty, she turned to me and smiled, her eyes gleaming with understanding. Life will have its share of mundane moments, she said, her voice soothing like a gentle breeze. But as long as we keep finding joy in the ridiculous, we'll be all right. In that moment, her reassurance calmed the storm within me. This relationship, with its quirks and spontaneous laughter, inked itself deeper into my heart, no longer merely a whimsical adventure but a genuine companionship I yearned to nurture. As the season changed, so did the fabric of our relationship. We began to integrate our silliness into everyday life. Once mundane errands became bursts of comedy as we playfully reenacted scenes from our favorite films in the aisles of the grocery store or turned waiting in lines into silly competitions of who could make the best fruit-themed puns. With each shared absurdity, the bond we formed became a buoy against the currents of normalcy. Then one evening, beneath a sky spattered with stars, we found ourselves at that same cherry blossom tree, the spot where so many of our inside jokes had been born. I looked into her eyes, their warmth reflecting the moonlight in a dance. It was the perfect moment, and both a little silly and profound. Suddenly, I pulled out a small package I had hidden in my bag. I know this sounds ridiculous, I began, feeling a warrior's heart flutter in my chest, but I wanted to ask you. She eagerly leaned closer, the anticipation etched across her face. As I unveiled a small, surreal bouquet of fruit-shaped magnets, I stammered through the laughter, if you'd be my partner in this absurd adventure for life. Her laughter filled the air as she nodded, tears of joy sparkling in her eyes. Yes. Absolutely, she exclaimed, and in that moment, we recognized that our hearts were no longer tucked away in fearful silence but were joyfully charting an exhilarating course toward the unexpected. In the days that followed, we embraced the delightful whimsy our relationship had forged. I realized that opening myself to the ridiculous had transformed my life, urging me to cherish not only the laughter but the deep, meaningful moments shared with someone who understood the beauty of life's absurdity. As we nestled into our future together, I knew this confession wasn't just about fruit or moments of laughter, it was a celebration of the incredible joy found in embracing life as it came, each day a fresh adventure painted with the hues of love, laughter, and the delightful unknown. You're never quite prepared for the moment when a friendship you thought was solid begins to crack, like the sudden appearance of a hairline fracture in a beloved piece of pottery. I always thought my best friend, Jessica, and I were inseparable. We met in college, bonding over late-night study sessions and shared cravings for pizza, and over the years, our friendship deepened through heartbreaks and triumphant job hunts. So, when she announced her engagement, I was ecstatic. The proposal story was adorable and included a classic movie moment. He got down on one knee at their favorite park, a sunset painting the sky behind them. But there was a twist, one I didn't see coming. She made a whole bridal party, picking 3 other friends as bridesmaids while leaving me out. My heart sank not just because I was omitted, but because there was no explanation, no discussion. It felt like a silent verdict on our friendship, sudden and devastating. In those first few weeks after her announcement, I threw myself into my job, burying myself in reports and deadlines, but still, her wedding was all anyone could talk about. Soon, it felt like the walls were closing in, everyone's excitement amplifying my hurt. When the invitations were sent out, and I received mine, just as a regular guest, it all hit me again. Are you going to help me? She asked one evening, her voice hopeful and bright. She needed help with planning, with organizing details, and with the emotional upheaval that comes with wedding preparations. A million thoughts surged through me, but all I managed was a restrained nod, feigning enthusiasm. Inside, though, a storm raged. I was angry at Jessica for not including me, but even more at myself for being so sensitive. She was still my best friend, right? I wrestled with the decision, tossing and turning at night, replaying our memories, trying to convince myself the exclusion didn't matter. But when I finally made the call, I felt as if I was stepping onto a tightrope. "Jess, I need to be honest," I told her, my voice trembling slightly. "I don't think I can help you with this." The silence that followed felt monumental, like I had just detonated a small bomb in the middle of our relationship. "Why?" she asked, confusion and hurt lacing her voice. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to articulate the ache I'd felt since becoming just a guest. "You didn't make me a bridesmaid. I honestly feel sidelined, like I'm not as important to you as I thought." There was a moment of silence that stretched on eternally. I briefly wondered if I should take it back, maybe promise to help anyway, but I needed her to understand why this hurt. There was probably a good reason, maybe she thought me too busy or too far away. But instead, it felt like rejection, and I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. Jessica's reply was a mixture of shock and disappointment, and in that moment, I saw the big gap forming between us, a chasm of unspoken words. "I didn't mean it like that," she whispered, and I felt the pain in her voice matching my own. "I just didn't think you'd want to." Those were the words that stung. They insinuated that maybe our friendship had been one-sided, or that I had become just a footnote in her new life narrative. Our conversation spiraled into arguments, silence, then tears. We avoided each other for days, walls closing in even more until they felt like a suffocating box. I had to confront my own insecurities. Was I being petty? A part of me wanted to reach out again, to apologize, but I wasn't sure I could stand being in a situation that made me feel so small. Eventually, while I wrestled with my thoughts, I received a text from Jessica. "I'm sorry for everything. Can we talk?" It was an olive branch, but I hesitated, caught between pride and the desperate wish to salvage our friendship. As I prepared for the conversation, I realized this wasn't just about a wedding or the title of bridesmaid. It was about clarity, about understanding our bond and figuring out where we stood now. In my heart, I wanted to believe that even if our friendship looked different, it wouldn't have to vanish. Time would tell where that conversation would lead us, but for now, I felt strangely hopeful that perhaps our friendship could bend without breaking. Life isn't always about titles and roles, sometimes, it's about navigating the gray areas together. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over everything as I watched the shadows stretch across the yard. Wedding preparation was in full swing at Emily's house, her younger sister and some of their closest friends buzzing around like bees. I took a moment to breathe, the sweet scent of blooming flowers blending with the anxiety swirling in my stomach. I'd spent nights imagining what this talk would entail, rehearsing potential angles and arguments in my head, but none of that seemed to matter the moment I stepped into the realm of reality. My best friend, the one I'd laughed with through countless late-night chats, the one I turned to during heartbreaks and victories alike, was standing before me, ideally the happiest bride-to-be. Yet there was a strange awkwardness between us. It felt like a vast canyon separating two cliffs, the old emotions reeling and clashing with the unresolved tension of our situation. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" I ventured, my voice caught somewhere between a plea and a whisper of uncertainty. Emily turned, her expression shifting from exuberant joy to cautious curiosity. There was a flicker of concern in her brown eyes, but, thankfully, no defensiveness. I watched as she nodded, leading me into a quieter corner of the yard where the sounds of chatter faded to muffled echoes. "Is everything okay?" she asked, a hint of worry creeping into her tone. I hesitated for a moment, searching for the right way to phrase my thoughts. "I just wanted to tell you that I've been feeling really left out since you announced the wedding. I know I wasn't chosen as a bridesmaid, and it stings, honestly." The words spilled from me, raw and unedited. Emily's face fell slightly, as if the wind had been knocked from her sails. "I didn't mean to exclude you. It's not that. I had to make some tough choices, and there was so much pressure from family," she replied, tears pooling slightly in her eyes. I hated seeing her upset, yet the frustration bubbled within me. How was it that the planning of her day, a day supposed to bring joy, was also tearing at the fabric of our friendship? We'd always celebrated each other's successes, supporting one another through thick and thin. "Emily, it feels like our friendship doesn't hold the same weight anymore. It's like I started retreating into my feelings, knowing I was on the outskirts of such an important moment for you," I confessed, my voice trembling slightly. I tried to explain that it wasn't just the bridesmaid title, it was about being an integral part of her life. It was about feeling seen, feeling valued. "I want to be there for you, but I also need to know where I fit in, you know?" Emily's expression turned contemplative, a mixture of regret and understanding washing over her. "I really didn't think it would feel like that to you. You mean so much to me, and I understand why you'd be hurt," she said, her voice softening. I'm sorry. I want you there, despite the traditional roles and things. We stood in silence for a moment, both reflecting upon the rift and the bridge that was slowly being built. My heart warmed with the possibility that there was more to our relationship than just the traditional norms society imposed on these moments. As we spoke more, apologies were exchanged, emotions fluctuated, tears, laughter, and finally a mutual understanding emerged. We decided I'd help with the wedding, not as a bridesmaid but as a devoted friend with a unique role, pivotal to the day yet without any labels that might diminish how I felt. It was then, in that honest exchange, that I realized friendships may shift and change, but that doesn't mean they have to wither away. There was a newfound desire to reshape our dynamic, and it flickered back to life. Months later, on the day of the wedding itself, as I stood near the entrance watching Emily float down the aisle in her magnificent gown, the butterflies inside my stomach danced not from jealousy, but from pride and a sense of elation. I smiled, not because I was there as a part of the bridal party but because I was celebrating my best friend, the one who had chosen to navigate the complexities of life with me instead of leaving me behind. Sure, the wedding didn't bring the same picturesque fantasy I might have fantasized about, but it illustrated how the love we shared had a way of bending, growing, and adapting through life's unexpected turns. I walked over to her after the ceremony, wrapping my arms around her as she glowed in happiness. Despite our hiccup, we were moving forward. Our bond forged stronger against the backdrop of a wedding, not diminished by any single title. As I pulled away from our embrace, I noticed her eyes glistening, not just from the emotional whirlpool of the day but also with gratitude. You were amazing today, she said, and I couldn't help but smile. It felt like a true acknowledgement, the first step toward healing whatever cracks had formed between us. That moment, wrapped in the warmth of her joy, grounded me, reminding me of all the laughter we'd shared over late-night movies and heartbreaks. We were built on memories, not titles, memories that had survived everything from petty arguments about whose turn it was to pick the restaurant to late-night heart-to-hearts about our wildest dreams. Maybe the role of bridesmaid had taken a backseat, but our friendship deserved recognition of its own, resilient and brimming with history. We stepped into the reception area, the whispers of congratulations. And you look gorgeous. Swirling around us like champagne bubbles. The music pulsed, a contagious beat that made it impossible not to sway a little, despite the awkwardness still nipping at the edges of my mind. I watched as she spun in her dress, her laughter cutting through the noise, and suddenly, I knew I wanted to dive in, to let go of the tension. I grabbed her hand, dragging her toward the dance floor, and we flailed around like two awkward marionettes, laughing as I spun her around, letting the day wash over me. As the night wore on, I took a moment to step outside onto the patio. The stars were twinkling like tiny beacons, and the sounds from inside softened. I pulled my phone out, contemplating the messages flying back and forth with my other friends, all debating whether or not I was right to feel hurt about not being a bridesmaid. Was I supposed to forgive and forget just because I realized that deep down, I craved her happiness more than the recognition? I didn't want to become a subject of petty gossip, but I also didn't want to silence my feelings. I pondered whether I was being irrational. Was I the asshole? I swirled the drink in my hand, suddenly exhausted by the complexity of it all. Then I heard the door creak open behind me. It was her, stepping out into the night, her voice soft and sincere. "Can I join you?" she asked, a hint of vulnerability coloring her tone. I nodded, and we stood side by side, both staring into the dark sky. "Sorry for earlier. I know I messed up not making you a bridesmaid," she started, her words tumbling out like a waterfall of emotions. I felt a knot tighten in my throat. "I thought it would be easier, but I see now how it might have hurt you." I turned to face her, wanting to speak but lost in the depth of her gaze. "It's okay. I value our friendship so much," I finally managed. "It means everything to me. I guess I just felt a little abandoned." There was a pause, a shared silence thick with understanding. "I didn't choose you to be my bridesmaid, but I did choose you to be in my life," she said slowly, her voice carrying weight. "You're still my best friend, and I'm sorry that title hurt you. You deserve to feel celebrated too." She took my hand in hers, warm and reassuring, and for that brief moment, the cosmic tension began to dissolve. This wasn't just about the wedding, it was about articulation, about redefining what mattered most to us. As we resumed our posts on the patio, reflecting on the evening, I realized this was less about the traditional roles we thought we were supposed to fit into and more about the enduring bond we were crafting, one layered with acceptance and understanding. So, as we walked back inside hand in hand, Faces beaming with a quiet joy only we could decipher, the night felt alive, vibrant. Not just from the glittering fairy lights or the cheers erupting from friends but from the rekindled spark of our friendship. We had navigated the gray areas, and life, with all its messiness, was still beautiful. And maybe that's the real celebration. So, look, I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. I'm a single parent to a quirky 7-year-old named Lily, and life is already a bit chaotic as it is, balancing work and school schedules while ensuring my kid has a stable home environment. For the most part, I've tried to keep things light and flowing. But then there's my Aunt Claire, bless her heart, who's always had this knack for pushing my buttons. She's one of those well-meaning relatives who just can't help but give unsolicited advice, and a lot of it revolves around how I'm raising Lily. Everything from what she eats to how I let her express herself creatively, which includes glitter, a lot of glitter. Recently, we had a family gathering for my brother's birthday, and it felt like Aunt Claire was on a mission. I could see her shooting judgmental glances my way whenever she thought Lily was being too loud or too independent, like a hawk stalking its prey. Finally, when she suggested I should take Lily's art supplies away because she thought they were too messy, something inside me just snapped. I remember looking at her, my palms sweaty, and saying something like, "Aunt Claire, if you can't respect my decisions as a parent, then maybe it's best if Lily doesn't come over anymore." The room fell silent, and I instantly regretted saying it, even as the words left my mouth. I could see the shock on her face, and I immediately felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Was I overreacting? Was I really okay with cutting my kid off from one of the few safe spaces she had, just to make a stand? I could almost hear my aunt's heart breaking, but it wasn't just her heartbreak that weighed on me. I felt the burden of being the bad guy in my own family story. I tossed and turned that night, replaying the confrontation in my head, grappling with feelings of anger directed toward Aunt Claire for being so critical, and guilt for possibly taking something away from Lily that she enjoyed. A few days later, she called me, voice trembling, to ask if we could have a chat. When we met, I could tell she was hurt, but she quickly shifted gears to talking about how she feels she's just looking out for Lily. I snapped back like a rubber band. I'm doing the best I can. If you feel that I'm not, then don't come around. After that, I felt awful, but also strangely liberated. My responsibility is to Lily, to protect her joy and creativity. Weeks passed without Aunt Claire, and honestly, Lily asked about her once or twice, but I brushed it off, trying to maintain a brave front. Then the real kicker happened. I overheard Lily talking to her friend about how she didn't want to go to Aunt Claire's house anyway because adults should let kids be kids. In that moment, I felt a strange mix of pride and sorrow, and I knew something had shifted. I kept reflecting on whether it was worth it to stand my ground, and while I missed the idea of family dinners and the warmth they brought, I realized my first priority is protecting my daughter from unrealistic expectations. Time marched on, and eventually, Aunt Claire reached out to see if we could start fresh, possibly meet up for donuts at our favorite bakery. I hesitated but texted back, "Let's try." I still don't know if I'm entirely ready to forgive, but as I write this, I feel hopeful. Maybe we could learn to communicate better, create a new understanding. Who knows? Maybe even my Aunt Claire will learn that sometimes, love means letting go a little. So where does that leave me? Honestly, still a little unsure but standing firm in my convictions. AITA? I guess it's all part of this messy parenting journey. As I sat in my tiny kitchen, steam swirling up from the coffee mug cradled between my palms, I couldn't shake the mix of apprehension and anticipation that clung to me after Claire's message. It felt like pulling on an old sweater that I used to adore but had somehow forgotten the fit of. I replayed our last encounter over and over in my head. My mind flickered back to the confrontation at my son's birthday party, the glares exchanged over the toppings for the cake. "It's gluten-free, Aunt Claire, because Danny has a sensitivity," I had said, trying to keep my voice steady as she argued that I was being overprotective. Every word of my conviction had been met with a wave of indignation from her, a woman who had once been my confidant, my ally in navigating the familial chaos. I couldn't help but feel the weight of disappointment settle on my shoulders like a heavy cloak. Yes, Aunt Claire had always been a source of wisdom, her stories rich with familial lore, but somewhere along the way, respect for my parenting decisions had dissolved into a pile of unsolicited advice and judgment. So here I was, contemplating a meetup that could potentially heal old wounds while still feeling the prick of betrayal. When I agreed to try, it felt like I was tiptoeing back to a place I used to know, a place that felt welcoming yet dangerous. Would this conversation lead to understanding or reignite old arguments? Would it be a stepping stone towards rebuilding or just another attempt to bulldoze my boundaries? My phone buzzed on the table, jolting me from my thoughts. It was a reminder pinging me about the donut date. This wasn't just coffee with a friend, it involved family dynamics that felt more complicated than navigating a labyrinth blindfolded. The clatter of my son's toys in the background momentarily distracted me, grounding me in my role as a mother, the constant evaluator of who gets to influence my child's life. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that parenting is as much about creating a safe space for my son as it is about ensuring he understands the nuances of relationships. The next morning, I found myself outside our favorite bakery, the scent of warm pastries flooding my senses. Claire was already there when I arrived, her coffee in hand, her expression a strange mix of hopeful and apologetic. "Hey," I said softly, an uncertain smile creeping on my face. She looked a bit older, perhaps weighed down by life's burdens or the realization, possibly, that she had crossed lines. We chatted about the usual, the weather, what a rainstorm had done to our childhood tree fort, but there it was, lingering beneath the surface, that tension between what I hoped we could be and the reality of our strained relationship. "I know I haven't been the best aunt," Claire said, her eyes fixed on the donut display like she was trying to find the right words hiding among the pastries. I wanted to believe her, to embrace this moment, but doubt bubbled within me. It's hard for me to see you navigate parenting. I feel like I have so much to offer, but maybe it's not what you want." Her honesty was refreshing yet disarming, and I found myself wrestling with the desire to let her back into my life, while also keeping my son out of the line of fire. "I appreciate that, Claire," I replied, my heart racing. "But it's crucial for me to set boundaries, especially for Danny's sake. I want him to grow up feeling safe and understood, not under scrutiny." As I spoke, I registered the flicker of realization in her eyes, a softened understanding. We spent the next hour unpacking the layers of our relationship, trying to navigate what love looks like when respect feels fragile. I shared my experiences as a single parent, how the choices I made were never arbitrary but deeply considered, always revolving around my child's well-being. And to my surprise, Claire listened, really listened. I caught moments where her expression shifted from defensiveness to contemplation, as if she was beginning to grasp that our love might need to take on a different shape. We hugged before parting ways, an uncertain but genuine gesture. As I drove home, a sense of cautious optimism filled me. It felt like we had planted the seeds for a new beginning, though I knew they would take time to grow. Would she fully respect my parenting choices? Only time would tell. After all, trust is like a delicate flower, it takes patience to bloom again after being trampled. That evening, as Danny clambered onto my lap for story time, I felt the warmth of possibility surrounding us. Sure, I was still a little unsure, still grappling with the anxiety that came with family dynamics, but I felt lighter. AITA? Maybe in someone's narrative, but in mine, it felt more like I was pushing through the chaos, determined to carve out our peace. I sighed contentedly, holding my son tighter, hoping both Claire and I were learning that forgiveness is often found in the spaces between boundaries and bravery. That evening, as we sat on the couch with the soft light from a nearby lamp casting a gentle glow around us, I couldn't help but marvel at how sweetly innocent Danny was. He squirmed a bit, all too eager to dive into his favorite story. "Mom, read me the one with the dragon," he chirped, his little arms flapping with excitement. I grinned, the kind of smile that muscles in your face almost forget how to make until a moment like this brings it back. I pulled him closer, the sweet smell of his freshly washed hair drifting upward, wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. It was magical how one little creature had the power to transform a tumultuous day into something warm and bright, yet deep down, I still felt that twinge of unease about Claire. It's funny how life has this way of testing your limits. After our spat, I had launched into a whirlwind of introspection, replaying every argument, every well-meaning but misguided advice she'd offered, as if retracing my steps might uncover the right answer. Understanding what I wanted from our relationship was one hurdle, but keeping Danny safe from the fallout felt like climbing a mountain in stilettos. I felt at that moment, cradling the little joy in my arms, that he was my best shot at a serene future. As we settled into the story, Danny clapped and giggled at the silly voices I used for the characters. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of fear. What if Claire, in her stubbornness, couldn't respect my boundaries again? I wanted my son to grow without the weight of adult conflicts pressing down on him. The heavy thought stuck with me like a burr under my skin. When I put him to bed later, I stood in the doorway watching him drift off, the soft rhythm of his breathing echoing back to me the peacefulness I wished for our family. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence, and I nearly jumped, pulling it from my pocket. Claire was texting again. A simple message this time, thinking about that donut date. Do you think we can get it right this time? I stared at the screen, my heart ambivalent, caught somewhere between wanting to build bridges and fearing the crumbling of foundations. I typed and deleted, before finally settling on a cautious, I hope so. But there are some things we need to discuss first. I hit send, a mixture of hopeful optimism and drumming dread billowing inside me. The next morning, I sipped my coffee, staring out the window, the soft rays illuminating the world outside. I thought about how the hardest conversations often end up being the most crucial. Finding a balance between love, boundaries, and forgiveness, it felt less like a checklist and more like a dance. A complicated one. When our donut date rolled around, I wore a smile that only half masked my nervousness. Danny sat beside me, oblivious to the underlying currents, munching on a glazed treat and occasionally dipping into my plate for the sprinkles. Claire arrived, and as she walked through the bakery door, I saw a hint of the old warmth in her eyes, but behind it lay uncertainty. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the patience that comes with healing. "Hey," I said softly, breaking the ice as we settled into a booth. "I believe in giving this a second shot. But we need some ground rules." "What are you talking about?" She responded, a hint of confusion in her voice, her brow wrinkling. I felt my heart race as I tried to articulate what I had been mulling over for weeks. "It's just, when it comes to Danny, I need you to respect my decisions as a parent." The weight of my words hung heavy in the air, shifting the mood between us. Claire's expression wavered, shifting from surprise to contemplation. "I understand. I think I've been stubborn about how I view things, and maybe it's time for a new perspective," she eventually admitted, reaching for a napkin as if to wipe away unspoken tension. As we talked, nibbling on donuts and sipping coffee, a sort of thaw took place. We laid raw feelings on the table, sharing our histories and misunderstandings, each crumb of pastry like a building block toward repairing our fractured relationship. I could see that she genuinely wanted to make amends, but the real test would be in her actions moving forward. Later, outside the bakery, Danny bounced ahead of us, trailing his fingers along the brick wall and giggling as he tried to capture every shadow cast by the trees overhead. In that moment, witnessing his innocent joy, I turned to Claire and said, "Thank you for showing up today." "Thank you for giving me the chance," she replied, her voice softer, more genuine. "I really want to be a part of his life, our lives, but I promise I will respect the boundaries you've set." As we parted ways, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension swirling through me. Maybe I had been too cautious in some ways, but I didn't think I was the villain of this story. I was just a mom trying to carve out a safe and loving space for her son while balancing the complexities of family entanglements. I hugged Danny a little tighter as we walked home, whispering to him that life is often imperfect but always worth navigating together. As he chattered away about his favorite dragon stories, I realized that even when it feels chaotic, there's beauty and growth, both in ourselves and in relationships. So, was I the asshole? Maybe to some, but in this chapter of my life, as messy as it was, I was simply doing my best to foster love and understanding. The journey was still unfolding, but I felt ready for what came next, embracing the hope that blooms even in the darkest corners. The question fluttered through my mind like a moth drawn to the dim light of my living room. It was simple, but the implications loomed heavy on my heart. Am I the asshole for charging my adult children rent? I never imagined this is where I would find myself at 55, standing at the crossroads of nurturing love and harsh reality. My children, Claire and Josh, had both moved back in after college, faced with a tight job market and student loans that loomed like clouds ready to burst. It felt like just yesterday I was sending them off into the world, filled with ambition and dreams, and now the stack of bills, once a distant whisper, was suddenly a roiling shout that demanded to be heard. I loved my children fiercely, but the reality of our situation was different now. My modest home, decorated with family photos that were practically engraved in my heart, was quickly becoming a shared refuge rather than a home. Things shifted, however, when the conversation turned to finances one evening while we surveyed my faded kitchen, once filled with laughter and now littered with remnants of takeout dinners. I broached the subject lightly, almost gingerly, trying to extricate myself from the churning feeling of guilt that wound tightly in my gut. "You know, it's not that we can't help each other," I started, "but maybe we should think about small contributions for living here." Claire, always the more outspoken of the two, rolled her eyes, casting a glance at Josh, who sat with his head buried in his phone, blissfully unaware. "Seriously?" Mom? Rent? We're trying to find our footing. She replied, exasperation cutting through her voice like a knife. I felt my heart sink as Josh chimed in, softening the blow with, "We're still your kids, you know." Initially, I shrugged off their anger, convincing myself it stemmed from the stress of their own financial burdens, yet the guilt lingered like a shadow. The thought that I might be seen as cold or unloving gnawed at me. My thoughts spiraled, had I failed them by expecting them to contribute to the household? But then, another voice in my head reminded me of the sacrifices I had made. I had worked extra shifts to give them what they needed, and it dawned on me that this was about preparing them for the realities of adulthood, not about making me less of a mother. Still, I wrestled nightly with the decision, my journal filled with poignant reflections on whether love and responsibility could coexist without one overshadowing the other. It was during a heated argument a few days later that it all boiled over, my attempts at calm being met with more resentment. "You say you're teaching us, but this feels more like punishment," Claire shouted, tears in her eyes. I held my breath, the weight of her distress settling heavily on my shoulders. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just about money, it was about trust and recognition. "I'm not punishing you. I want you both to thrive. I want you to prepare for the world outside these walls," I replied, my voice trembling with emotion. The room became engulfed in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. It was clear I needed to reconsider the way forward. After much soul-searching, I decided to propose a compromise that would allow us to keep our familial bond intact. The very next day, I gathered my children and talked through my thoughts, removing the label of rent and instead framing it as a living contribution, focusing on what they could help with, whether it was chores or a small monthly amount that would go toward shared costs. To my surprise, they listened, the tension in the room gradually ebbing as we discussed our expectations with open hearts. "So it's not about just money, right? It's teamwork?" Josh asked, his eyes lighting up with understanding. I nodded fervently, relief washing over me like a tidal wave. We moved forward with boundaries but also with a renewed sense of cooperation, and I marveled at the transformation that occurred, realizing we were not simply roommates navigating rent but rather a family redefining our dynamics together. As the weeks turned into months, I discovered that this change not only eased my financial burden but also rekindled a sense of shared purpose among us. Conversations returned to the table, laughter emanated from our shared moments, and in those evenings spent together, it felt as if we were finding our way back, stitching back together what was nearly frayed. The idea of charging them rent became not a source of resentment but a catalyst for deeper connection. In hindsight, I didn't just charge them, I opened the door to joint stewardship of our lives, an adjustment that allowed us to step forward together rather than apart. As for updates, it's been almost a year since the paradigm shift, and I'm heartened to say Claire now has an internship that could lead to a full-time job, while Josh is earning his keep through freelance gigs. They still contribute to household expenses, each month passing me their share with pride, as if each note exchanged is more than just money, but a message that reads, "We've got this, together." And as I sit in the same faded kitchen, watching them grow into the people I always hoped they would be, I realize this journey has taught me as much as it has taught them. Am I the asshole? Perhaps once, but I've come to understand that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead to the strongest connections. As I sit in that faded kitchen, sunlight streaming through the sheer curtains, casting soft shadows on the table where we gather for our makeshift family meetings, I reflect on how our home has transformed over the past few months. When Josh and Emily moved in, there was a palpable tension in the air, a mix of expectation and uncertainty. I had been battling my own insecurities and regrets about charging them rent, fearing it would disrupt our bond. Yet, every time I see them, filled with determination. As they balance schoolwork with part-time jobs, I feel an overwhelming sense of pride. Each evening, as we share our meals, the laughter echoes in the corners of the room, wrapping around us like a warm blanket, dispelling any lingering doubt I had initially held about my decision. It had been Josh who first approached me with concern about finances after losing his last full-time job. He spoke earnestly about wanting to contribute more rather than feel like a burden. "I don't want you to struggle because of me," he had said, that familiar spark of responsibility igniting in his eyes. How could I argue with that? Emily followed suit, her spirit equally fired up, insisting that she too wanted to pitch in, to contribute to the household in a way that felt meaningful. It was then that I realized this was about more than just money, it was about empowerment. With the rent agreement in place, I made it abundantly clear that their contributions would be saved toward a future goal, perhaps toward their educational aspirations or an eventual escape of their own, helping to ensure they wouldn't find themselves completely reliant on me once they stepped into the wider world. Each time I handed them a receipt showing their contributions, I would joke, "Look at you, you're practically business owners now." Following those jokes were serious discussions about budgeting and saving. They would listen intently, their eyes bright, eager to absorb the advice, while I shared tales from my own youth, trying to weave in lessons learned as I stumbled through life. Those evenings began to intertwine with deeper conversations about dreams, fears, and the kind of people they envisioned themselves becoming. With every discussion, I could feel our relationship evolving, both as a parent and as individuals seeking to understand one another. One rainy afternoon, however, things took a challenging turn. Emily returned home distraught, her usual spark dulled. "Mom, I don't know if I can continue doing this. It feels like everything is piling on top of me," she admitted, falling onto the couch, her voice strained and defeated. I joined her on the couch, pulling the fuzzy blanket over us as we settled into the silence that accompanied her heavy words. The weight of missed assignments and looming deadlines pressed on her like an ocean wave, and I could see the hope in her eyes flicker momentarily. "What if we adjust a bit? Rent doesn't always have to be paid in full," I offered gently. "Your well-being comes first. It's okay to ask for help." My words seemed to hang in the air, and for a moment, silence enveloped us before she finally nodded, a small smile breaking through the storm clouds. As the weeks rolled by, we found new rhythms, discussing every tweak and adjustment we made to our agreements candidly. Josh, too, began to share his own struggles more openly, confessing moments of loneliness and his fear of never reaching the ambitions he carried. It was during one of these powerful exchanges that I understood the true essence of decisions made from love. Not only did they learn responsibility, but they also discovered vulnerability and space for genuine dialogue, something I had always longed for us to possess. We emerged stronger as a family, moved forward by empathy and mutual respect, acknowledging our individual journeys without losing sight of our shared path. In this warm cocoon of familiarity and love, I've realized that our home isn't just a physical space, it's a sanctuary carved from our shared experiences, successes, and collective heartaches. The question of whether I was the asshole lingers somewhere in the back of my mind, but it has transformed from a painful inquiry into an echo of a lesson learned. By fostering their independence within the walls of our home, I not only nurtured their growth but also kept the ties of our relationship tightly woven, reminding us all that love doesn't fade in the face of responsibility. Instead, it evolves, deepening in ways I could never have imagined. As I sit here, I can see that it isn't about the money or even the chores, it's about understanding, growth, and creating an environment where we can all be better versions of ourselves together. And while the future is uncertain, a chorus of questions still unanswered, I feel a profound sense of gratitude for this shared journey, knowing that being a parent is less about getting it right all the time and more about navigating every twist and turn with an open heart. Sometimes, I find solace in the thought of letting each of them fly with their own set of wings, ready to embrace whatever the world has in store, while I would remain here, cheering them on from the sidelines, proud of the choices we made together in this home of ours. However, as the weeks passed, I began to experience an unfamiliar unease, a gentle pressure building beneath the surface of our harmonious existence. It started with those quiet moments, sitting alone in my favorite worn-out chair while Josh and Lena collaborated at the kitchen table, their laughter and chatter creating a cozy atmosphere that made my heart swell with pride. Yet, tucked away in the corner of my mind was a prickling doubt, whispering that perhaps I had placed an unnecessary burden on their shoulders. The thoughts started to gnaw at me during sleepless nights, where thoughts raced through my mind like leaves caught in a gust of wind, questioning my decisions and choices. They did, after all, come to me during the pandemic when everything had been uncertain, their lives upended in ways I couldn't fully grasp. I remember my own parents, who had faced such trials with grit and resilience, but never once did they charge me rent. As days turned into weeks, the tight-knit bond we shared sometimes felt like it stood on shaky ground. I tried to brush it off, focusing on the joy of our routines, breakfast-making competitions, game nights peppered with sarcasm and laughter. And those afternoons when I would find them lost in their respective worlds, creativity bursting from them like blooming wildflowers. But the shadows of my thoughts lingered, lingering as a subtle reminder that their growing independence came with its own set of fears. One night, after an especially hectic day, I was cleaning up the remnants of dinner, overwhelmed by a sudden wave of clarity. I turned to them and, in a voice that quivered with a mix of uncertainty and resolve, asked if they felt the same way I did. To my surprise, their expressions turned serious, and I felt as if I had ventured into unknown territory. Josh, with his thoughtful gaze, spoke first. "Mom, we appreciate everything you've done for us. We're here because you let us be ourselves, and if charging rent is part of that, then we accept it as a part of our growth." Lena, always the more intuitive one, added, "It's funny you mention this because I was worried it was our responsibility to take care of you, not the other way around." Their words, laden with sincerity, left me both relieved and bewildered. Here I was, thinking I was the one responsible for their future, yet together, we had created something profound, a partnership built on mutual respect and support. The subsequent weeks held a newfound sense of openness. The pressure lifted, replaced by unexpected lightness. We spoke often, delving into deeper conversations about financial stability, career aspirations, and dreams yet to be realized. Each discussion became a building block, forming a bridge between my worries and their understanding of adulthood, and suddenly, Josh and Lena were no longer just my children, but partners in a shared journey of life. As we moved further into this phase of our lives, I began to find joy in the small victories, the little projects that each of them undertook that ventured into adulthood's daunting reality, with me as a spectator cheering them on in the background. One evening, each of them sat next to me, Josh back from a successful project pitch, Lena having submitted her first freelance article, the air thick with accomplishment. I placed my hand on theirs, a silent acknowledgement of our collective achievements, a bond that transcended the need for rent or adulting responsibilities. They were soaring, and I realized I was simply here to help them acclimate to the winds beneath their wings. And so our story evolved, settling into a rhythm that felt genuine and nurturing. It was about more than money or bills, it was about lessons learned under our roof, and I cherished the thought that perhaps I hadn't been the asshole after all. It was merely the ebb and flow of family dynamics shifting. With nights spent under the gentle glow of lamplight discussing prospects and dreams, I understood that being together, sharing our fears and aspirations, had emboldened us, allowing for a new understanding about what it means to navigate adulthood together. As we moved further into this unknown future, I embraced it. The unknown no longer felt like a weight but a canvas awaiting our colors. Perhaps being a parent is knowing when to let the reins go, and I felt ready for whatever paths lay ahead. The uncertainty didn't haunt me anymore, it ignited a sense of adventure. So, maybe in this journey, I was never an asshole, but rather just a guide, and we were collectively painting a beautiful masterpiece of our shared lives. You wouldn't think something as simple as a horse could cause a rift in a family, but here I am, sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the vet bill that's become a symbol of all the chaos. I never imagined that dealing with my two beloved Arabians, Bella and Zeus, would lead to me sending an invoice to my little sister, Liv. It all started when she turned 16 and, in a burst of teenage whimsy, decided she could help me with my horses. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, the kind that lulls you into a sense of easy comfort, when Liv bounded into the barn, her ponytail bouncing behind her. I was mucking out the stalls, the earthy smell of hay and a hint of manure filling the air, when I heard her excited voice cutting through my thoughts. "Can I bring my friends over to see Bella and Zeus?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with possibility. "Sure," I replied, though I secretly wondered why she thought her friends would care about horses. A couple of hours later, a gaggle of giggling girls squeezed into the barn, each one more enthusiastic than the last. They fed the horses treats, petted them, and eventually, much to my horror, began scheming about breeding. I tried to interject, reminding them all that it wasn't just a game. "Breeding is a big deal, Liv," I said, keeping my tone light but firm. "It's not just about having cute foals." But she brushed me off, somehow convinced it would be a fun adventure. It was a naive, childish thought, and I didn't really think she would pursue anything further. But I should have known better. A few days passed, and one evening, I strolled out to check on Bella and Zeus only to find Liv and her friends unsupervised in the pasture. The horses were separated by a flimsy fence, and Liv stood in the center, hands on her hips, gesturing animatedly. I felt a pit in my stomach as I rushed over. "What on earth are you doing?" I nearly shouted, my heart racing. Liv grinned. "Zeus and Bella are going to have a baby," she declared, her eyes wide with excitement. "I let them out together." The realization hit me hard. What if they actually tried to mate? My mind spun with scenarios. Sure, Zeus was gelded, but my sister clearly didn't understand the implications of what she had done. I could feel every muscle in my body tense as I ushered her friends out, grounding myself in the moment, but inside, a storm was brewing. Sure enough, the next morning, Bella had a minor injury from the chaotic encounter. I watched them both for days, my anxiety gnawing at me, before finally taking them to the vet. The bill was astronomical, and as I stared at the figures, I felt my love for my sister turn into frustration. I scrawled an invoice of my own, detailing the unnecessary vet expenses. The hesitation was brutal. Do I really send this to my sister? After a sleepless night and a barrage of self-reflection, I hit send. I thought I'd feel a rush of relief, but instead, dread washed over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line. When she received it, the silence was deafening. I waited, heart thudding, bracing for the fallout. Liv finally responded with tears, accusing me of being a heartless sister. I felt sick. All I had wanted was to protect my horses and prevent any future mishaps. But in my quest for retribution, I felt I'd maybe soured the bond between us. It took days of barely speaking to each other before we could even sit down and hash it out. We both cried, she apologized for being reckless, and I confessed how much the whole ordeal had shaken me. We came to an understanding. She would look after Bella and Zeus, and I would be more patient. It all felt surreal, almost haunting, how a simple mishap turned a common Saturday into this ping-pong of emotions. I realized that while I might have been justified in my feelings of frustration, I could have handled it with a bit more grace. As I sit here now, sipping a cup of tea, looking out at the pasture, Liv is out there with the horses, brushing them with a focus I hadn't noticed before. Maybe we both learned something, after all. Life with family isn't easy, and it's definitely a balancing act. As for the vet bill, I now simply consider it an investment in understanding each other better, a reminder that family, like horses, might need a bit more guidance to grow. I find myself smiling as I watch Liv, a little focused whirlwind in that wide expanse of green, her tangles of hair whipping around her face in the breeze. It's almost humorous how she can draw those horses into her orbit. They seem to respond to her presence. I remember the chaos of last week, the shock flaring through my entire body when I discovered her near my barn, attempting to corral my stallion, Duke, and my mare, Bella, for what she thought was a matchmaking session. It felt like she was going to be the next horse whisperer, but in reality, she was just an enthusiastic 11-year-old trying to play God, completely oblivious to the risks involved. The whole scene flashed through my mind, Liv's pleading eyes as she assured me it was just a harmless idea. Just because she was my little sister didn't mean I wouldn't worry about the potential damage, physical and emotional, those horses could incur. When the vet bill arrived, I hesitated, anger pooling in my gut. I should have been understanding. After all, horse breeding felt so foreign to Liv, yet she approached it with this wild imagination that I once had, 2 decades ago. But that day, in the midst of my frustrations and my concerns crashing together, my practicality took over. I sent her the bill with a curt message, a small gesture that felt justified in the moment. Later, though, when I saw her face fall as she read my text, a crumbling hurt that matched the weight in my chest, I regretted my approach. The tension between us grew, a lingering small storm in a family that had always prided ourselves on unity. Watching her now, though, I realize how quickly that storm can quiet. Like a big gray cloud dissolving into sunlight. We've both had our moments, haven't we? I suppose family isn't always about being right, it's about learning how to navigate missteps together. As Liv pauses, resting her head against Bella's neck, I see that her love for horses runs deep. She isn't out there to craft experiments but to bond with creatures that can teach us about trust and kindness. And just like that, with every brushstroke, I can feel the tension washing away, moving not only through her but through me. I think about bringing it up, the bill, how I've learned to communicate better, maybe even apologizing for my reaction, but I realize this quiet moment may speak louder than any words. Living with her, sharing these valleys of mistakes and growth, was more rewarding than I'd ever allowed myself to appreciate before. With a deeper resolve in my heart, I decide to keep our dialogue open, to be patient with her and myself as we navigate our own learning curves together. I take another sip of my tea, watching the scene before me, and I find peace in knowing that perhaps that vet bill wasn't just a cost but a bridge that had invited us closer to each other, showing that the things that strain us can also shape us. As I sat there, watching Liv methodically brush each horse with tender strokes, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity wash over me. The sun kissed the horizon, casting warm hues over the pasture and illuminating the imperfections on our little homestead. Each broken fence post, each patch of wildflowers spilling over the edges reminded me that life itself isn't meant to be immaculate. I took another slow sip of my tea, letting its warmth seep through my fingers. It wasn't just about the vet bill anymore, it was about the lessons we often overlook when wrapped up in our frustrations. Liv might not have understood the intricacies of horse breeding, and I was once that naive too, chasing dreams with little comprehension of the weight they carried. Maybe her audacity came from a place of wonder, in wanting to connect with the horses the same way I did, a desire for closeness that I hadn't acknowledged until now. I remembered how I used to climb onto my childhood pony without a thought, dreaming of galloping free, completely unbothered by the complexities that came as we got older. The image of my little sister, wide-eyed and hopeful, trying to orchestrate her own version of magic between the horses tugged at my heartstrings. I thought of our conversations, the times we'd spoken past each other over petty squabbles. A breath of fresh air settled into my thoughts. Perhaps I had been too harsh, too quick to defend the reputation of my horses rather than embrace the sincerity of her intentions. The realization hit me that I had inadvertently shrouded her curiosity with anger, turning her unassuming questions into something heavy and laden with guilt. Watching her now, I noticed the way her lips curled gently, humming a tuneless song as she brushed. There was a quiet joy to that moment, a reminder of the innocence we often forget in this busy world. As she finished with one horse, she turned, and I caught her eye. For a moment, we exchanged an understanding smile, one that resonated louder than the silent echoes of our past miscommunications. I decided then that the time had come to change the narrative between us. After she finished with the horses, I set my tea down, absorbing the tranquility of the moment, and called out to her. "Hey Liv, wanna help me with the draft horses feed?" I asked, my voice light, inviting. There was a pause, a flicker of uncertainty in her eye, but then she nodded and brushed off her hands as she made her way over, that same spark of determination lighting her features. As we worked side by side, stirring the grains and chatting about the horses' behaviors, I felt the tension ease like a breeze clearing the winter air. It was in those simple exchanges, the laughter we shared while doing something mundane, that I learned how quickly we could bridge gaps with understanding. The vet bill, rather than the anchor weighing us down, had transformed into a compass, guiding us toward forging this newfound bond. Later that evening, as the stars began to twinkle against the twilight sky, I felt a soft warmth in my heart, a sense that we were finally on a journey together rather than as rivals in each other's lives. I wanted to hug her, to tell her how proud I was of her, and though it felt a little lopsided, I resolved to start anew. We were already plotting ways to improve the barn together, talking about equestrian lessons, the projects we could take on, and a possible trip to the local horse show next summer. Who knew Liv's venture into the world of horses could bloom into something so beautiful if only we kept nurturing it with patience and compassion. As I lay in bed that night, the sound of content horses softly neighing in the distance, I realized that family, like a good horse, might need trust, room to breathe, and a little grace. Perhaps the challenge was never about the vet bill at all, but about allowing ourselves the space to learn, grow, and certainly, love unconditionally.